Chapter 19. New uses for pig brains. You'd better get up quickly. Ch.19 returned to his seat and asked, "Do you know where the hospital stores its medicines?" The female teacher, hearing this, excitedly said, "You agreed?" Ch.19 smiled, "Yes, but first, tell me how to find the pharmacy." "I know nothing about it." Hearing his affirmative answer, the children immediately burst into laughter and joy, clapping their hands. "Yay! Uncle, I knew you would agree. You're a good person." A middle school girl, about 13 or 14, bravely approached Ch.19, joyfully saying, "Xiao Shui is saved." "Uncle?" Ch.19 was initially puzzled but then felt very uncomfortable hearing this. He didn't think he was that old. It wasn't the children's fault either. Ch.19 always wore night vision goggles, hiding his true face. Being called uncle was quite normal. Ch.19 didn't have the time or the inclination to correct this title. He urged the female teacher, "Do you know where it is? Also, I know nothing about medicines or which ones you need." After being urged several times, the female teacher apologized, "Sorry, I was too excited. Don't worry about the medicines in the pharmacy. My father used to be a doctor there. Later, he was. Never mind, just take me there. I know where it is." "No, you can't go in. I won't be able to protect you if things get dangerous." Ch.19 refused without thinking. It was a joke to have a regular person with him in such fierce battles. Ch.19 thought for a moment and said, "Draw me a map of the hospital pharmacy. I'll go in alone." The female teacher knew she would be a burden if she went along, so she didn't argue. She quickly drew a map of the pharmacy's location and the names of the needed medicines based on her memory. There were two places. One was the regular medicine window with some common drugs, and the other was the hospital pharmacy with a security door that would be hard to open. However, Ch.19 believed that his sword, filled with energy, would make it easy. Ch.19 left the restaurant, sneaking all the way according to the female teacher's map. He first chose a tall building across from the hospital, observing carefully with his night vision goggles. He trusted the goggles for recognizing routes, but relying on them for detecting monsters was too risky. There were three visible through the goggles. Ch.19 calmed down and sensed the world's energy fluctuations, not noticing the abnormalities from the last encounter at Ch.19 supermarket. He was 90% sure there were only three. But entering was a problem. The community hospital had two gates on different streets. The red beetles wandered unpredictably, and no matter which corner he entered from, he would be spotted by one, with the other two rushing over immediately. Ch.19 slapped his forehead. He kept thinking about how to break in but forgot he could lure the beetles out. The more he thought about it, the more brilliant he found his idea. There was a 9-seater van parked at the opposite gate of the hospital, facing away. The passenger window was broken, allowing him to sneak in directly. He quickly executed his plan. It didn't take much effort for Ch.19 to sneak into the van's passenger seat. This old-fashioned van's windows could be rolled down by hand. He extended his crossbow. The distance was perfect. Shooting from the tall building might not have been effective enough. Taking a deep breath, he was ready to provoke three red beetles. The closest one stopped for a moment, looking in his direction cautiously. Ch.19 did not hesitate, pulling the trigger immediately since he had been spotted. The arrow hit. The other two reacted, moving at high speed. Ch.19 knew that with his current archery skills, hitting a fast-moving target with one arrow was impossible. The only way was to use the handgun. With more bullets, at least one would hit. Using his 92 type handgun, he injected approximately 2 units of energy and fired all 15 bullets in one go. By then, the beetle was already on the roof, tearing it apart. He now realized how lucky he had been at the Ch.19 supermarket. Out of 15 bullets, at most 1 or 2 hit, only slightly injuring the beetle, which was still highly dangerous. Corrosive mucus quickly penetrated the roof but was deflected by the 6th armor charm. Ch.19 realized he had gotten the sequence wrong. The plan was to shoot the ice arrow first and then the bullets. With the van's defense, he forgot to use it, missing the opportunity to improve his accuracy. He found himself inexperienced in frontal battles. No amount of ambushing could replace such experience. Regretting now was useless. Enduring the attacks of the corrosive saliva and the long, spiky legs of the bug, he quickly changed the magazine. At this moment, the entire Jinbei van had been pierced with countless holes by the bug's sharp legs. A large hole had been corroded in the roof, and the bug was screeching, ready to pounce inside. Bang! Bang! Through the big hole, he fired at the beetle's abdomen, consuming another unit of energy. Fortunately, the beetle caught fire, retreating desperately, and another beetle finally broke into the cabin, clamping Ch.19 and dragging him out. With the 6th armor charm's protection, the beetle couldn't easily sever him. However, the internal injuries from the clamp were excruciating and blood dripped from his mouth. With his right hand holding the handgun and the beetle's other pincer tearing at him, he felt as if his arm was about to be torn off. Using his left hand, he drew his sword again, stabbing the beetle's head frantically. Unlike before, the beetle didn't give him a chance to pierce its mouth, wasting nearly 1 unit of energy. By now, he had consumed 5 units of energy, freezing one beetle and burning another, their fates uncertain. He was entangled with the last one, neither side able to overpower the other. Anxious, he knew he couldn't continue like this. If the frozen one thawed or the burning one regained some strength, the 6th armor charm wouldn't hold against 2 beetles. What weapon did he have left? Staying calm, he used energy to scan his storage charm carefully. Stored corrosive mucus was useless against beetles, he had experimented with that. Beetle legs, equally useless. Pig brains? Useless. Pig intestines? What nonsense. Wait, pig brains. He wondered if smashing the beetle's head with them would work. Beetles loved them. Even a moment's distraction might allow him to escape. Also, the Fire Rain Talisman, an ancient 3rd-level offensive charm, was extremely powerful, though he had almost forgotten about it. Thinking of the ace in his hand, the Fire Rain Talisman, Ch.19 immediately felt less tense. Hastily pulling out the pig brains, he smashed them on the beetle's ugly head. Gathering energy, he waited for a moment's distraction to break free. Though the pig brains weren't fresh, they were still genuine, and the beetle's instinctive reaction caused it to hesitate. Using that moment, Ch.19 wedged his energy-filled sword into the beetle's pincer gap, shouting as he forced it open slightly. Despite the pain, he retracted his right hand, aimed at the beetle's head, and fired his last bullet, injecting 1 unit of energy. Chapter 20. New monster Ch.19 sat on the ground, staring blankly at the pig brains that had saved him, contemplating whether he should visit a nearby zoo to gather more animal brains. Although he had stored plenty of pork, he had only 3 pig brains, never imagining they would prove so useful. He checked his injuries, his right hand was numb and moving it caused intense pain. His abdomen, clamped tightly by the beetle, was the most severely injured, making breathing extremely painful. However, he was intact, and these injuries would eventually heal with the help of energy. With 2 units of energy left, it was more than enough to finish off the dying beetles. After collecting the 3 beetle corpses and cleaning up, Ch.19 didn't dare rush into the hospital. Dragging his numb right hand, he found a secluded corner. During this time, he had saved up 2 full fire talismans, and before setting out, he had only 2 units of energy left due to the fight with the bald men. He replenished 6 units, consuming 1 talisman. Now, he had 1.5 talismans left, totaling 9 flame symbols, which could provide about 18 units of energy. Now, he consumed 3 flame symbols to fill his energy. Watching the talisman shatter, Ch.19 lit a cigarette, contemplating that killing 3 beetles consumed 6 units of energy. From an energy perspective, it balanced out, but he gained 3 beetle carapaces and other materials, making it worthwhile. He didn't dare rest long. After finishing his cigarette, he immediately moved again. The community hospital had an outpatient building and a small inpatient ward. The courtyard was littered with bodies, both doctors and patients, all with empty skulls from the beetles. The automatic doors of the outpatient building were shattered, with glass shards crunching underfoot. The reception desk was covered in thick blood, the hall scattered with medical records and newspapers. The headlines were stark: "The sun disappears," and "Monsters attack humans. The army intervenes." An intestine hung from the registration window, the blood frozen into a bloody ice block. Money swirled in the wind at the cashier's desk, hinting at the chaos that had occurred. A cabinet was propped against the security door, with a hole punched through it, a ghastly eyeball hanging from rusty metal, staring into the dark hallway. The doctor's promotional frame was broken, hair with traces of blood stuck to the glass. Turning right, Ch.19 reached the medication pickup area. The glass window, labeled "Pharmacy," was shattered, the surrounding chairs for waiting patients scattered. The ceiling fan had fallen, broken into pieces. Ch.19 didn't know what had happened here, but it was eerily quiet, so quiet he could only hear his own footsteps. Every step echoed in the empty hallway, like walking into hell, with a strong scent of blood. Feeling uneasy and sensing something eerie, he decided to grab the medicines quickly and leave. The pharmacy window glass was broken. Carefully moving the shards, he crawled over the counter. The medicine cabinets were toppled, pills scattered across the room. Using his storage talisman, Ch.19 quickly collected all the medicines, not having time to sort them. The pickup area didn't have many medicines. The bulk should be in the pharmacy storage, as indicated by the female teacher's map. To reach it, he had to pass through a long, dark hallway. Should he go or not? Ch.19 felt a nameless dread toward the hallway. Hospitals were eerie, and with monsters around, it was even more terrifying. Grabbing a cash register from the counter, he threw it down the hallway and quickly aimed his crossbow. The register clanged and rolled far down the hallway. Nothing happened, no monsters appeared, no ghosts emerged. Ch.19 relaxed a bit, thinking he was too tense. If there were monsters, they should have appeared already. Turning on the infrared source, the dark hallway turned green through his night vision goggles, looking even more sinister. Ch.19 gripped his crossbow tightly, cautiously exploring the depths of the hallway. Despite his careful steps, the sound of his shoes echoed loudly, reverberating in the long hallway. His palms were sweaty with tension, but for the sake of the medicines, he had to take the risk. Even if not for the children, he would need these life-saving medicines in the future. He avoided looking into the rooms on either side, focusing on quickly passing through the hallway, then turning right and going up one level to the pharmacy storage. Passing another room on the left, a white figure flickered inside. Ch.19 immediately pressed against the left wall, his heart pounding. He hesitated whether to look again when a cold, intermittent song came from the room. "Who's there?" Ch.19 called softly, the icy song sending chills down his spine. No one answered, the song continued clearly from the room. Steeling himself, Ch.19 decided to face it. He had killed dozens of beetles, why fear anything else? Just as he was about to kick the door, it creaked open on its own. Aiming his crossbow, he saw a woman, fully naked, with disheveled hair failing to hide her pretty face and shapely body, emitting a faint white glow. Her empty eyes stared at Ch.19, her small mouth singing coldly. "Who are you?" Ch.19 asked, unfazed, his nerves steeled by the apocalypse. The woman was strange, defying logic. In this cold weather, she wore no clothes, yet her skin was pale as a ghost's. She didn't answer but smiled eerily and walked toward him, her breasts bouncing in the faint light. Ch.19's protective talisman flickered. Alarmed, he shouted, "Stop! Or I'll shoot." She kept approaching, light and haunting, as if controlled by something. Ch.19 wouldn't let anyone threaten his safety, nor be swayed by a naked woman. He pulled the trigger without hesitation. At such close range, the powerful ice arrow pierced her chest, pinning her to the wall. "Ah!" she screamed shrilly. As she was being frozen, Ch.19 saw her smile faintly, a glimmer in her empty eyes, as if relieved. A low, strange growl came from the inpatient ward behind, angry as if something precious had been taken. "What the hell?" Startled, Ch.19 didn't dwell on it. He quickly headed to the pharmacy storage, determined to grab the medicines and leave, avoiding the inpatient ward. He ran, turned the corner, and found the storage quickly. The locked door was no match for his weapons. The storage was clean, showing no signs of chaos. Ch.19 swiftly collected the medicines, not even sparing the refrigeration units. With the task completed, he hurried back to the hallway, feeling something watching him. The hallway to the right led to the medicine room, to the left, a turn led to the inpatient ward. The feeling came from the left. Ch.19 gripped his crossbow, knowing the most terrifying thing in this world was probably insects. But when he saw a long, tube-like creature with a fleshy eye at the end, slithering like a tentacle from the hallway's end, he realized there might be more than just insects in this world. Chapter 21. Severely injuring the tentacle monster, Ch.19 hesitated no longer and immediately put away his crossbow, drawing his handgun instead. His countless near-death experiences had taught him that no matter how dangerous or terrifying the situation, even if the sky were falling, he must not panic. Panicking would spell the end. With this thing blocking his path, there was no choice but to fight to the death. No matter what kind of monster it was, survival demanded a bloody battle to the end. The crossbow wasn't effective against something this thin and long. Even if he hit it, the long, tube-like structure might not be entirely frozen. The handgun might also miss, but the fire energy bullets could burn anything, hopefully buying him some time. Without waiting for the monster to make the first move, Ch.19 fired his gun, fully believing the creature harbored no friendly intentions. The tentacle, with its tumor-like eye, deftly dodged Ch.19's bullet, writhing rapidly as it retreated. Simultaneously, 3 soft tentacles as thick as an adult's thigh emerged from the darkness on both sides of the passage, twisting around each other to encircle him. Ch.19 had no better plan, so he used 1 unit of energy, shooting wildly in an attempt to ignite the fire energy and burn away the tentacles. Against the powerful fire energy bullets, 2 of the soft tentacles immediately sacrificed themselves, blocking Ch.19's bullets with their bodies. Despite the strong smell of burning flesh, they fearlessly shielded the 3rd tentacle from every bullet. The tentacles were incredibly agile, especially the one designated for attack. It moved like a nimble water snake, quickly wrapping around Ch.19's body. Relying on the protection of the 6 armor talisman and the energy surging within him, Ch.19 struggled free several times, only to be ensnared again. When the 4th and 5th tentacles appeared, Ch.19 nearly despaired. His body was tightly wrapped, his bullets spent, and his hands restrained, unable to reload. The soft tentacles, estimating that Ch.19 was no longer a threat, lifted him into the air, dragging him towards the inpatient ward. Suppressing his panic, Ch.19's mind raced, seeking a way to escape. The community hospital's inpatient ward was only 4 stories high but very wide. As he was dragged inside, Ch.19 noticed that the floors of the 3 stories had been connected, with walls covered in sticky, glowing green fluid, turning the entire building into a cohesive, moss-covered cave. The walls were densely packed with naked women, astonishing Ch.19. Some still wore remnants of patient and nurse uniforms. Ch.19 finally understood his earlier unease in the hall: it was too clean. There should have been many empty skulls left by the beetles, but there were none. Drawing a sharp breath, he realized all the bodies were here, and it seemed they weren't completely dead. Suddenly, he saw a thin, almost transparent tube inserted into the back of a girl's head, manipulating her like a puppet. She passed by him, her empty eyes staring ahead. These people were being controlled by this creature, explaining why the naked woman he encountered earlier moved so ghostly, and the strange cry after he shot her was also from this monster. Ch.19's curiosity now outweighed his fear. What kind of monster was this? The center of the building housed a bubbling pool of mucus, filled with blood and flesh. Occasionally, a human corpse wrapped in transparent membrane would rise, resembling a cocoon. Each cocoon was connected by tubes of various thicknesses to a central, 5-meter-tall, mucus-covered, tree-like structure, as well as smaller cylindrical creatures around it. The largest creature, with a diameter of 3 to 4 meters, was covered in tubular appendages and thick tentacles. The tentacles binding Ch.19 came from this enormous monster. All the tubes and tentacles were busily working. As Ch.19 was dragged closer, he saw that the women hanging on the walls had tubes inserted into their lower bodies, filled with bubbling, disgusting fluid. Some women's bellies were hugely distended, while others had just burst, releasing palm-sized cylindrical creatures that quickly devoured their corpses. It was reproducing, massively reproducing. Ch.19 stared in shock. The pool of mucus below, he guessed, was the nutrient solution feeding these monsters. What the hell is this thing? Ch.19, frightened and struggling, was slowly dragged towards the mucus pool. A tentacle as thick as a human thigh appeared in front of him, its tip splitting open into a large, gaping mouth, which began swallowing him from the top of his head. As it swallowed him, the tube-like walls of the tentacle expanded, wrapping tightly around him, forming a human-shaped cocoon. Inside the tentacle, a large amount of mucus oozed out, tightly enveloping Ch.19. He felt the 6 armor talisman activate, protecting him and his gear, including his night vision goggles. However, he couldn't breathe, bringing him to the edge of suffocation. With a pop, the mucus-covered Ch.19 was spat out by the tentacle, landing in the mucus pool. A thin tube tried to insert into his head but was deflected by the 6 armor talisman. His face turning red from holding his breath, Ch.19 realized this was his chance to escape. Protected by the 6 armor talisman, the mucus couldn't harm him immediately. Even his clothes and handgun remained safe within the energy barrier. Now, he could draw his sword and cut through the mucus cocoon, but he knew he wouldn't get far. The tentacles would quickly recapture him. His only option was to approach the central mother monster and severely injure it before escaping. This was the opportunity. His cocoon was being retracted by the fine tube that the 6 armor talisman had deflected, causing the cocoon to float on the mucus pool, slowly approaching the underside of the mother monster. All around him, human cocoons that had been melted into remnants floated past. Ch.19 held his breath, thankful that the primary stage, storage body, allowed him to barely manage. His hands stealthily changed the magazine below. There were less than 30 rounds left. Then, he quickly took out an absorption talisman and slowly replenished his vital energy bit by bit. He dared not replenish at the normal speed, fearing that the monster would notice and all would be lost. A little closer, until he was completely against the bottom of the mother monster. It seemed not to have noticed anything unusual. 1, 2, 3. Ch.19 focused his mind. Now, with 6 units of energy, he fired 3 shots, each imbued with 1 unit of energy. The cocoon's wall shattered instantly, and the bullets, burning with fierce energy, shot towards the mother monster. Taking a deep breath, Ch.19 felt he had narrowly avoided suffocation. The monster's surface had an energy barrier, which Ch.19 had anticipated. Even red beetles had one. This more terrifying monster couldn't lack it. Roaring in rage, the monster's numerous tentacles lashed out towards Ch.19. The bullets swirled violently against the monster's barrier, the energy flames burning furiously. As the barrier weakened, Ch.19 pressed his gun against the thinnest part, firing 2 more shots, each with 1 unit of energy. The fire energy bullets exploded inside the monster, causing its mucus flesh to erupt violently. Pieces of its flesh flew everywhere. The monster screamed as its body sank into the melting mucus pool. Ch.19 estimated that he had probably wounded it, if not killed it, and now it was time to escape. A piece of the monster's internal flesh flew out from the ruptured opening, disgustingly landing on his head and hanging over his night vision goggles. Ch.19 immediately felt that this small piece of flesh contained as much vital energy as several red beetles. At this moment, he had no time to think. The sinking monster had already mobilized at least 10 tentacles to heavily surround him. Outside, many smaller monsters were climbing up the massive tentacles, their mouth-like appendages shrieking wildly. At this life-and-death moment, Ch.19 dared not hesitate any longer. He pulled out the fire rain talisman that he had nearly forgotten about earlier. This third-tier talisman, given his current primary stage, storage body, cultivation, could at most unleash only 20% of its power. It was a great waste, but he had no choice but to use this talisman to save his life. Watching the swarming tentacles and small monsters, Ch.19 quickly mobilized his vital energy and activated the fire rain talisman. The character representing Li shot out from the talisman into the air, drawing a vast amount of vital energy towards the talisman, gathering more and more. With a sharp sound, the character split open, and the divine fire of heaven rained down upon the earth. Chapter 22. The Birth of the Battle Armor. 2 hours later, Ch.19 returned to his room in Building 8 of Mingdu Garden. Exhausted both physically and mentally, he used his empty gun to ignite some fire energy, heating up some of his stored water to wash himself thoroughly. The power of the fire talisman had far exceeded his expectations. Even at only 2/10 of its full strength, it had obliterated the tentacles completely. He knew that the core of the mother monster hidden in the melting mucus pool could not have been killed. The energy-rich piece of flesh he had retrieved from its core was evidence that this monster was far beyond the level of the red beetles. However, he had managed to withdraw from the inpatient ward without further pursuit by any tentacles, indicating that he had at least severely wounded the mother monster. After giving the teacher some fever medicine, he decided to take a rest. All he wanted now was a good night's sleep, free from thoughts and actions. Ch.19 dreamt again, this time of being chased by a group of red beetles. He jumped into a pit filled with naked women and tried to escape, only to find his feet entangled by fine tentacles. Awakening in a cold sweat, he sat by the window, lit a candle, and opened his journal. After some thought, he carefully wrote down: Red beetle mature stage origin. Unknown level. Unknown size. Approximately 4 meters long, 2 meters wide, and 2.5 meters high. Attack methods: pincers, blade legs, corrosive saliva defense. Shell, energy shield. Characteristics: prefers darkness, feeds on brain's location. Unknown tentacle monster. Mother body origin. Unknown level. Unknown size. Approximately 5 meters tall, 4 meters in diameter, cylindrical, many tentacles, tubular structures. Attack methods: tentacle entanglement, mucus dissolution, mouth-like tubes for biting. Defense: energy shield, primarily relies on tentacles. Characteristics: reproduces through parasitizing humans. Location unknown. After recording all the information he knew about these monsters, Ch.19 closed his journal. The dark times were becoming increasingly dangerous. The red beetles alone were overwhelming humanity, and now such terrifying creatures had emerged, compounding the calamity. To survive in such a world, the more information he knew about these monsters, the safer he would be. Therefore, he decided to document everything he learned in his journal. There might be more monsters and even more powerful creatures appearing in the future. If he didn't strengthen himself quickly, he could end up dead on the streets at any moment. This operation, although it nearly cost him his life again, was not without gains. He obtained many valuable medicines and encountered more powerful creatures, which would undoubtedly serve as motivation and a wake-up call for his future cultivation. Additionally, he extracted 4 units of energy from the piece of flesh from the tentacle mother's core, supplementing his consumption and indicating the monster's immense power. For now, he wasn't strong enough to challenge this monster. Once he became stronger, he might attempt to hunt it down. Now, he needed to collect more beetles. Ch.19 was eager to equip himself with powerful battle armor. Changing into new clothes, which made him feel much better, he revved up his motorcycle and plunged into the darkness once more. He felt increasingly pressed for time. In the neighborhood, he overheard people saying that the military might eventually abandon the city. Currently, there were large numbers of troops fighting the beetles in the city. If the military withdrew, the beetles would spread out, and facing even 3 beetles would be an improbable challenge. He had only 1 fully charged energy absorption talisman left, the others had been used up. He had 41 beetle corpses, needing just 19 more. The remaining number wasn't too many. He had to quickly forge the battle armor. Relying solely on the first level 6 armor talisman was making him increasingly uneasy. Ch.19 chose to hunt near a bridge connecting the eastern and western districts. The bridge was heavily guarded by the military, with helicopters occasionally roaring overhead. The beetles constantly tried to take the bridge but were repelled by the military's fierce resistance and firepower. The beetles were increasing in number, while the military's soldiers and ammunition were depleting. It was only a matter of time before these areas were overrun. Ch.19 ambushed in a nearby building, waiting for injured beetles retreating from the bridge. He never missed an opportunity to attack these wounded beetles, as they were the easiest targets. When there were no beetles, he practiced his shooting skills. His archery skills were poor. Hitting stationary beetles was manageable, but once they started moving fast, accuracy was purely based on luck. Practicing archery was tedious. Thankfully, it was a crossbow, not a bow. Maintaining body stability, steady footing, and natural arm movement would improve his accuracy. Any instability would cause him to miss. Fortunately, red beetles were huge, and as long as the ice arrows grazed them, the freezing energy would be released, improving his success rate. It took him 5 full days to gather the remaining 19 beetles, averaging less than 4 per day, highlighting his inability to face more than 3 beetles at once. With the final 19 beetles in hand, Ch.19's spirits lifted. He could finally go back and craft his battle armor, which would greatly accelerate his cultivation. Back at his base in Mingdu Garden, Ch.19 locked all the doors and windows. Following the ancient book's guidelines, he carefully crafted his first battle armor talisman. The complete battle armor would cover his torso, shoulders, arms, legs, and even his head, hands, and feet, providing maximum protection. The armor's design was sleek and streamlined. Ch.19 chose the most stylish design, based on practicality, satisfying his vanity. After crafting the armor talisman, Ch.19 had an idea. His sword couldn't pierce the beetle's shells, so why not include a sword in the armor talisman? He had seen such a design in one of the illustrations in the ancient book. Although he wasn't sure if it would work, he decided to give it a try. After completing the 3-dimensional design, he added the 4th-dimensional channel to connect the talisman to the design. He didn't understand the principle, but he could follow the instructions. Next, he inscribed some refining symbols, made the talisman head and seal, consuming nearly 8 units of energy. It seemed his decision to increase his energy capacity to 9 units before making the armor was correct. With everything prepared, Ch.19 filled himself with energy, then activated and controlled the battle armor talisman. The sword-inclusive design shot out from the talisman, rotating in midair, casting light on a circular area. Ch.19 quickly placed a beetle shell underneath. After a while, the shell disintegrated into starlight, absorbed by the battle armor, though there was no visible change. Ch.19 knew the armor required a lot of materials to refine, so he continued placing more shells in the light beam. As he placed more and more shells, the battle armor in midair gradually became more solid from the top down. After using approximately 46 shells, the entire battle armor was fully materialized, but only part of the sword was complete. When he experimentally added 2 more shells, he found that the armor continued to absorb them, but the sword did not. What's going on? Chapter 23. 3 sword techniques to slay insects. Ch.19 pondered silently. The armor had already taken shape but could still continue to absorb materials, indicating it could be continuously upgraded and refined. In the future, he could use any new red beetle shells he obtained to further enhance the armor. However, the sword part was peculiar. It couldn't continue absorbing the shells. He speculated that the materials might be incorrect, but since he couldn't understand the characters annotated under the sword diagram in the ancient book, he didn't dare to make any conclusions. After thinking it over for a long time without understanding, he decided to try putting the red beetle's legs and pincers into it. The result was surprising. The sword part could absorb these materials. After consuming all the stored legs and pincers, a crimson long sword finally formed into a physical entity. Ch.19 was ecstatic and thought that the legs and pincers of the red beetles must be different from their shells. One was focused on offensive capability, while the other on defense. Thus, materials with offensive properties could refine the sword's body. To ensure the armor achieved the best effect, Ch.19 immediately put the remaining 10 or so shells into it, all of which were absorbed by the armor. The armor made from red beetle shells was also crimson. Although it differed from the dark black he wanted, it wasn't a time to be too picky. Despite both the armor and sword being crimson, they didn't carry the fire attribute of the red beetles. Instead, they were in the same pure primordial state as Ch.19's energy, greatly enhancing their plasticity. Using the armor symbol was also very convenient. Once sealed inside the body, the armor could be activated during battle by injecting energy into the symbol. The armor would immediately shoot out from the symbol, break down into individual parts, float around the body, and then instantaneously assemble, perfectly encasing each part of the body, forming a seamless unit. The sword hung on the left side, and Ch.19 felt a sharp, intimidating aura as soon as he drew it out. The original long sword was relegated to the second line, stored in the storage symbol, just in case it might come in handy someday. He believed in not wasting any resources. The entire armor-making process consumed a large amount of energy to control the armor symbol and refine the materials. After finishing, Ch.19 checked his energy levels and found he had less than 1 unit left. Smiling bitterly, he took out the last storage symbol, absorbing the 3 remaining fire symbols to barely reach 7 energy units. Next, he crafted new protective and divine weapon symbols and sealed them onto the armor and sword. Ch.19 felt confident that as long as he injected 1 unit of energy into the sword, it could definitely pierce the red beetle's shell. After all, this was refined from nearly 240 insect legs and 120 pincer's essence. Ch.19 believed that if he could understand how to create second-stage protective and divine weapon symbols from the ancient book, the power of his armor and sword would be even greater. Reaching the fusion stage allowed him to learn a sword technique named 1,000 Armies Fleeing, which he had always aspired to. He decided to name his sword 1,000 Fleeing Sword, hoping this sharp sword could help him cut through thousands of insects. With the armor and 1,000 Fleeing Sword, Ch.19 naturally felt more confident. If not for his energy depletion, he would have wanted to immediately gear up and battle the red beetles again. His goal now was to reach the fusion stage quickly. To achieve this, he needed to temper his internal energy 54 times. He realized he had miscalculated earlier. As his internal energy increased, he would need to kill many more insects. For instance, to fill his energy to 9 units now, he needed 4.5 red beetles fire symbols. Once he reached 10 units, he would need 5 red beetles, and each level increase would require an additional half red beetle. However, Ch.19 wasn't discouraged. With the armor and 1,000 Fleeing Sword, he was confident he could speed up his insect killing pace. His biggest problem now was to reach the fusion stage quickly, ensuring his safety and possibly leading others. The second problem was his slow understanding of the ancient book's characters. It was like facing a treasure mountain, knowing it was full of treasures but being unable to find the path up the mountain. Reaching the fusion stage was just a matter of speeding up his practice, but understanding the characters of the ancient book was a more daunting task. These characters, not even resembling Oracle bone script, were strange and numerous, with many peculiarities. The only way was to continuously speculate, guess, and then experiment to verify his guesses. Ch.19 decided to first reach the fusion stage, hoping that his understanding of the ancient book would improve with a higher realm, allowing him to conduct more experiments. After all, the second and third stages of symbols were very rich in variety. After a nap, he calmed down from his excitement and carefully thought things through. While 1,000 Fleeing Sword was indeed a powerful weapon, if he couldn't utilize it effectively, its power would be significantly reduced. Just like his ice arrows, limited by his poor shooting skills, they couldn't fully exert their deterrent power if not used for sneak attacks. If he were a skilled crossbowman, the deterrent power of the ice arrows shouldn't be limited to just pre-battle sneak attacks. Thus, he didn't want to blindly use 1,000 Fleeing Sword. Although the ancient book had battle techniques, he couldn't learn them due to his current level. He decided to study some basic sword techniques. Although the ancient book had some, they were few and he couldn't understand those characters. Moreover, the ancient book didn't highly regard these techniques, treating them as auxiliary skills to familiarize the user with the sword's nature rather than as powerful techniques. Since he couldn't understand the ancient book's sword techniques, it didn't matter. During the Sunshine era, Ch.19 had prepared a large number of martial arts materials, bought from bookstores and printed from online sources. Now, they could be put to use. The basic sword moves included hooking, hanging, pointing, thrusting, lifting, chopping, and more. Ch.19 naturally wouldn't learn all these moves. They were too many and too chaotic. He didn't have that much time. His primary threat now was the red beetles, so his sword techniques needed to address the characteristics of these insects. Ch.19 recalled the red beetles' attack patterns as he flipped through various materials. He needed to devise a set of the simplest and most practical sword techniques. Red beetle attacks were usually straightforward. They either charged to clamp their prey with pincers or stabbed with their leg blades. When these attacks failed, they would resort to spitting corrosive saliva. Despite their formidable attack power, their methods weren't complex. Combining these insights with his own capabilities, Ch.19 devised a set of 3 offensive sword techniques. The first move was a straight overhead chop, called the chopping sword technique. Holding the sword with both hands, he would raise it high, and when the beetle approached, he would chop straight down, aiming to strike the beetle's head. If the beetle didn't dodge, this blow would likely cause severe damage or even kill it, as the head was the most vulnerable part. If the beetle dodged or he missed the head, he would then use the second move, the slicing sword technique. The slicing technique was simple and practical. After failing the overhead chop, the sword would be lowered. He would turn his wrist to level the sword and, depending on the beetle's position, slice diagonally from lower right to upper left if the beetle was on the left, aiming to cut through either its head or body to cause significant damage. If the beetle managed to avoid this and leapt over him with its jumping ability, the third technique would be a backward-upward slash, known as the lifting sword technique. Chapter 24. What is a killer move? Rial, as the name implies, is a strike from bottom to top. When the red beetle jumps, combine it with body movements, using the reverse sword for a Rial attack, aiming at various parts of the beetle as the situation dictates. Executing these 3 sword strikes seamlessly might not guarantee a kill, but it should significantly injure the red beetle. Ch.19 knew that real battles with beetles would often be perilous and unpredictable. What he needed now was to master these 3 moves until they became second nature. There's a saying from the sunny days. What is a killer move? A killer move is a simple technique practiced to perfection. Ch.19's goal was to refine these basic 3 strikes, repeatedly practicing them to the highest level. Even though each move seemed straightforward, to fully unleash his and the sword's power, he had to practice every step tirelessly until he found the optimal sword style suited to his strength. Simulating real combat, Ch.19 activated his armor, fully equipped with weapons, including his crossbow and handgun, to recreate battle scenarios. To make it even more realistic, he tied himself to a wardrobe, simulating being grabbed by a beetle, practicing how to effectively use his sword while bound. First, he practiced each move individually, finding the best state for his strength and energy. Swing after swing, he practiced tirelessly, focusing on the basics. Sword moves with the body. The body guides the sword. Stable body, stable sword. Stable sword, stable energy. Ch.19 aimed to synchronize his sword techniques with his energy, achieving a perfect blend of sword form and energy flow. Coordination of hand, eye, body, movement, and steps had to become second nature, transitioning from conscious coordination to an instinctive flow. This required immense practice. Fortunately, with only 3 moves to master, progress was possible. Even in the freezing weather, Ch.19 practiced until he was drenched in sweat, barely scratching the surface of these techniques. For 3 days, he did nothing but practice these 3 sword strikes until he could execute them flawlessly with his eyes closed. However, he knew this was merely the beginning. The synchronization of energy and strength wasn't yet optimal. Only in actual combat could he truly grasp the integration of energy and strength. Pure physical strength, even with the sharpness of the 1,000-fleeing sword, couldn't perfectly penetrate the dual defenses of the red beetle's protective shield and shell. Only an energy-infused battle sword could breach these defenses. Ch.19 needed a real battle to test the effectiveness of his techniques and to measure energy consumption. He had to be economical, always trying to stretch 1 unit of energy to do the work of 2. With only 3 units of energy left in his body, he decided against resting and recovering for 8 or 9 days at home. It was too much of a time waste. He needed to fight to sustain himself, using the energy from red beetles to kill more red beetles. As chaos settled, the survivors in Shen City began forming loose groups. Lone wolves found it hard to fight red beetles or even scavenge for food. The only exception was someone like Ch.19. Large groups of people, carrying torches, searched for food everywhere, even scrounging up rats from the sewers for their last meals. Despite the terror of the beetles, it was better to take a chance outside than to sit and starve. It wasn't yet swarming with beetles, so with some luck, one might not encounter any. This explained the sudden appearance of many people on the streets. Hunger had driven them out. Ch.19 activated his armor and prepared himself. Even his night vision device was fixed onto his helmet, as his energy-based sensing was still insufficient in the dark. This attracted curious stares, but he couldn't afford to be careless. Beetles were too fast. He might not even have time to activate his armor if one attacked. He had walked a few streets without encountering any beetles when he suddenly heard someone shout ahead, "Run! Beetles are coming! Run!" Screams and the sound of many running feet filled the air, heightening the tension. Ch.19 quickly hid in a building's recess, holding his crossbow. Panic-stricken people ran past, some dropping their torches. A cold joke from the sunny days came to mind. Two people encounter a tiger. One says to run, the other says it's futile because the tiger is faster. The first one replies, "I don't need to run faster than the tiger, just faster than you." It was a grim reality now: outrun others, and you survive, the slowest gets eaten. Ch.19 aimed his icy crossbow at a red beetle attacking someone, hesitating not for a second. The ice arrow shot out, as invincible as ever, straight at the beetle. Armored up, Ch.19 moved with agility. The armor's features allowed him to leap 3 meters high instantly. After firing the arrow, he swiftly retrieved his crossbow. It was time for the 1,000 fleeing sword to shine. With only 2 beetles, he could have handled them with his handgun, but he needed a beetle for testing and had less than 20 bullets left. The sword was the best choice. He sped past the frozen beetle, slicing its head off with the 1,000 fleeing sword without even using energy. The blade's sharpness alone severed the beetle's neck. The other beetle, seeing Ch.19, abandoned its captured human and charged at him, screeching. Both rushed toward each other at high speed. Ch.19 raised the 1,000 fleeing sword high, channeling a quarter of his energy into it. With a powerful slash, he collided with the beetle, sending both flying backward from the impact. Protected by his armor, Ch.19 quickly sprang up, unharmed. The beetle also recovered swiftly. A quarter of his energy wasn't enough to break its defense. He increased it to half, leapt up with the armor's help, and struck down. The beetle, screaming, tried to block with its pincers. With a crunch, Ch.19's sword broke through, slicing into the beetle's head base. The beetle's defense weakened significantly. Ch.19 shouted, channeling another half unit of energy into the sword. Using the second move, the sword beheaded the beetle, green fluid spraying out, deflected by his protective symbol. Without using battle skills, 1 unit of energy to kill a beetle was the combined power of his armor and the 1,000 fleeing sword. Ice arrows, a form of energy technique, had an elemental advantage but could only freeze, not kill. The armor and sword combo, however, allowed him to kill a beetle with 1 unit of energy and engage in close combat. Ch.19 stood momentarily stunned by his own prowess. Chapter 25. The Great Evacuation. Retrieving the 2 headless red beetle corpses, Ch.19 didn't bother with the shocked crowd behind him. With a heart trembling in excitement, he quickly melted into the darkness. Using 1 unit of energy to kill a red beetle seemed comparable in power to the ice arrows. However, Ch.19 was acutely aware that freezing a red beetle with 1 ice arrow was only ideal in perfect conditions and impractical in real combat. In all his previous battles, only the first ice arrow could roughly guarantee freezing a beetle. Once the other beetles got close, he often needed to expend 2 units, or even more, of energy to kill just 1 red beetle. Not only that, but being in close combat with those ferocious beetles also posed a life-threatening risk. Now, things were different. With the protection of his armor, he could even engage in head-on collisions with the red beetles without falling behind. Additionally, a single sword strike, consuming just 1 unit of energy, could be effective and practical in combat. Ch.19 was confident that if he had a full 9 units of energy, he could slay at least 8 red beetles in a battle without any problem. After carefully cleaning the 1,000 fleeing sword, Ch.19 stood on the rooftop of a 20-story building. The brief joy brought by the armor was quickly overshadowed by the news from the military. He gazed down with mixed feelings at the 3 Type 99 main battle tanks and 6 Type 97 infantry fighting vehicles, which were slowly advancing with their headlights on. The loudspeakers on the vehicles continuously broadcasted the General Command's emergency notice. "We call them red beetles. We are making every sacrifice and trying every means to eliminate these insects appearing everywhere. The city is filled with numerous insect passages that cannot be destroyed, allowing red beetles to continuously enter our city. The situation has deteriorated continuously. Recently, the number of red beetles in the city has surged again. It is uncontrollable and extremely dangerous. After careful discussion and decision by the command, we must announce the forced evacuation of the entire city from now on. The whole city is forced to evacuate. All people who hear this decision can follow the military to evacuate, heading towards Jinling City. The only good news is that according to scientific analysis, the main urban area of Jinling City contains a large amount of some unknown substance, and no insect passages have been found in the main urban area. The General Command has decided to establish a new defense system in Jinling City. There, after months of bloody battles and sacrifices, our troops have completely cleared the red beetles from the outer city into Jinling's main city. They are now constructing a strong defensive line on the outskirts of Jinling City and have successfully repelled multiple insect invasions. The command has decided that from the date of this notice, the military will hold the line for another 72 hours. People who wish to seek refuge in Jinling City must leave the city within 72 hours. After 72 hours, the rearguard units will be the last to withdraw from the city, covering the retreat of the civilians. So, they were finally giving up on this place? The evacuation of more than 20 million people? Just thinking about it made Ch.19's scalp tingle. Perhaps the military couldn't hold on any longer, or maybe the situation had become dire beyond repair. The great evacuation of the city might just be the military's last resort, a reluctant explanation to the public, essentially abandoning them. This was a disaster for Shen City and a calamity for all humanity. The entire world must be trembling under the tyranny of these insects by now, maybe. Ch.19's thoughts were in disarray. Although he had heard rumors, and some people, like the expert upstairs, had already moved to the military camp, when this day actually arrived, he found it hard to accept. More than 20 million people. What a colossal crowd. He could hardly imagine it. The chaos, disorder, frantic escapes, insect attacks, lack of food, lack of medicine. How many people would die on this path? Ch.19 didn't know why the General Command made this decision. Since the sun disappeared, Shen City, as a major city in the country, had received the highest level of defense deployment. It was said that to defend Shen City, the Supreme Commander abandoned many small and medium-sized cities in one go, concentrating the most elite and powerful military forces from the East China region into Shen City. But now, they were giving up. Ch.19 vaguely felt that the command must have discovered some new situation, maybe new monsters, or a surge in insect numbers, making it unsustainable to continue wasting manpower and resources. Rather than facing an inevitable fall, it was better to preserve existing forces to strengthen a new defense system for humanity's last refuge. However, these were all his speculations. One thing was clear: his escape journey was about to begin. Even though he had the armor, the 1,000 sword, and the ice arrows, these hadn't made him overconfident enough to face the upcoming swarms of insects alone. Following the large retreat was his only and best option. Besides, his only relative was in Jinling City. The escape was about to start. But before that, Ch.19 thought he should prepare something. Kill more insects to store energy. Search for useful items for future needs. He wouldn't naively believe that the nearly 300 kilometers to Jinling City would be free of danger. As long as he had the ancient book, the armor, and the talismans, Ch.19 was confident he could safely reach Jinling City. Didn't they say Jinling City's main urban area was cleared of insects? Then there, using Jinling City as a base, he could work hard to cultivate, hunting the red beetles outside the city. It would be much better than constantly being on edge, even while sleeping, eating, or relieving himself, fearing the sudden appearance of insects. He wondered about his aunt's family in Jinling City. His aunt was his only relative after his parents passed away. Before and after the sun disappeared, he had called his aunt several times, repeatedly reminding them to stay safe, even asking them to come to his base in Shen City. But his aunt didn't seem to take it seriously, instead advising him to stop worrying and focus on his job. Communication was then cut off, and Ch.19 couldn't reach them anymore. Ch.19 had been relentlessly cultivating vital energy not just to save his own life but also to protect his family and friends. He hadn't expected the insects to come so quickly and viciously, disrupting all his plans. Once the insects arrived, he lost contact with them. Fortunately, the military's message gave him some relief. Jinling City still stood. As long as his aunt's family survived the initial insect attacks, they should be relatively safe now. But he worried if they had enough food. Ch.19 was anxious. According to the ancient book, the intersection of Earth and the alien space's celestial tracks opened passages. For some unknown reason, Jinling City's main urban area was spared from these passages, making it easier for the military to clear the city. Unlike Shen City, with many insect passages in its urban area, new ones kept emerging, making it impossible to eliminate the endless waves of insects. This might be one reason for the command's decision to abandon the city. Ch.19 collected his thoughts, deciding, first, return to his base at Mingdu Garden to pack up. Then use the 72 hours to gather supplies and kill more insects, preparing for the unprecedented evacuation.